You know, when we think about leadership, we usually think about titles or charisma or these big grand theories. But what if it's simpler than that? What if true leadership starts with just a single moment of attention? In this explainer, we're going to dive into Kevin Stephenson's book, When Others Look to You, and map out the two incredibly different paths that can spring from that one simple moment. See, this is the spark, right here. It's not about your job title. It's about a shift in focus in a room. The second a colleague or a teammate or even a family member looks at you when things are uncertain, that's it. Leadership has just been initiated. And suddenly, everything you do, your posture, what you say, what you don't say, it all carries so much more weight. And that's the real question, isn't it? That initial glance is just the beginning. The really crucial part is what happens next. How does that one fleeting moment of attention start to harden into a real, durable structure? And more importantly, where does that structure end up leading everyone? Okay, so that brings us to the first section of our map, how leadership actually hardens. We're going to look at what the book calls the forming patterns. This is the process that takes a quick moment of focus and turns it into an unshakable habit, turning how we're doing things right now into how we always do things around here. This whole thing unfolds in three pretty distinct steps. First, you've got a moment of chaos or uncertainty, and boom, attention finds a focus. All eyes just land on one person. Next, that person's actions start to become the unwritten rules, what they reward, what they ignore, what they punish. Examples accumulate, and trust me, they spread way faster than any company handbook. And finally, through sheer repetition, those examples solidify. Leadership coalesces, hardening around that one person and their specific way of doing things. So once that leadership structure is formed and has hardened, it hits a critical fork in the road. It has to make a choice. And that choice is going to determine whether the group stays healthy, adaptive, and, well, alive, or if it starts to decay from the inside out. And here it is. This map shows the entire journey. You can see how, right after those initial forming patterns, the road splits. On one side, you have the path of renewal, and on the other, the path of erosion. This map is going to be our guide for the rest of this explainer. Okay, so this is absolutely the crucial point. The choice between these two paths, it boils down to a single fundamental question. The path to renewal is constantly asking, can we still change course when we get new information? But the path to erosion is driven by a very different question. Do we protect the story we've been telling, even if it means ignoring the facts? So let's explore that first path, the path to renewal. Now, this isn't about being perfect. Not at all. It's about having a set of reinforcing habits or patterns that actually let a group correct its own mistakes and stay plugged into reality. Let's go back to our map here. See that left-hand path? The path to renewal is built on these three specific adjusting patterns. You can think of these as the core habits of any healthy group. So let's start with that first one. The first pattern, and you could argue it's the most vital one for a healthy system, is actually pretty simple. Dissent is welcomed. This is basically the group's immune system. When dissent is genuinely welcomed, it means people can raise problems while they're still small and fixable. It means bad news can actually travel up to the people who need to hear it without them shooting the messenger. It's the one thing that keeps the entire system honest. This little story from the book just captures it perfectly. It's this tiny moment where a team lead gets corrected in public, but instead of getting defensive or punishing the person, she just accepts it and changes course. That one small action shows all three renewal patterns at once. Dissent was welcomed, that feedback drove a real change, and the leader felt the consequences. That is what renewal looks like on the ground. But what happens when that immune system fails? Well, that takes us to the other side of the map, the path to erosion. This is what it looks like when a group seems stable on the outside, but underneath the surface, it's quietly breaking down. So, looking back at our map, you can see how this dangerous path gets built. Just like renewal, erosion is defined by its own sequence of patterns. But these eroding patterns do the exact opposite. They systematically shut down the very feedback loops that a group needs to survive. And it all starts with the direct opposite of a healthy system. Instead of dissent being welcomed, disagreement is suppressed. This is the very first red flag that a group is starting to care more about comfort than it does about the truth. I mean, think about being in an environment like this. Just asking a tough question starts to feel like an act of betrayal. So what happens? People just stop. Or they soften their feedback so much that it becomes totally useless. The paths for fixing things get narrower and narrower.
and big errors stay buried, just festering until they grow into some kind of catastrophe.
Now, here's another really critical pattern you see on the path to erosion. It's one that's usually born during a crisis, but it sticks around long after the emergency is over. It's called exceptions are forever. This story just nails it, right? There was a flood, so they made a decision under pressure to bypass the normal rules. But 3 years later, the justification, "we learned we can't wait," is still being used long after the floodwaters are gone. That temporary fix became a permanent part of the system, and it's slowly eroding the very processes that were meant to keep things accountable.
Okay, so we've seen how leadership forms and then how it splits onto one of two paths, renewal or erosion. But here's the thing, neither path is a dead end. The habits you build on those paths, they create a template. They end up determining exactly what gets copied by the next generation of leaders. And this brings us to the final and most crucial pattern on our map. It's called the circulating pattern. This is where both paths ultimately lead. It shows us that the system you build, whether it's based on renewal or based on erosion, is the exact system that's going to get passed on. This might be the most powerful idea here. Leadership reproduces itself. The habits that people see getting rewarded are the same habits they're going to imitate when it's their turn to lead. The system is constantly teaching people, whether it's safe to speak up, to fix mistakes, and to take initiative long before they ever get a formal title. A leader's most lasting legacy isn't some big project, it's the pattern they teach everyone else to copy. So this leaves us with one final and really critical question for you. Think about the teams, the companies, the groups you're a part of. What behavior actually gets rewarded? What gets punished, even subtly? In your world right now, which path is being copied? Is it the path of renewal or the path of erosion? The answer to that question might tell you more about the future than you think.